Welcome to another Best Worst. This is going to be about the Dallas Mavericks. I'm rocking my Luka jersey because, of course, I love Luka. The Dallas Mavericks obviously had their best year in a very long time, making the Western Conference Finals. They lost to the eventual champion Warriors in six, but Luka was, if not wasn't the best player in the series, but he was right there with Steph Curry, and it was an excellent series. I loved watching it, and it was sad to see Luka go home, but sometimes that happens in the playoffs when you're the worst team, and that's kind of what happened. And unfortunately, that team took a giant step back, losing Jalen Brunson for nothing in the offseason. Of course, the Mavericks did sign Christian Wood, and they got JaVale McGee as well, who are going to add a lot of value. JaVale McGee, in case you didn't know, in 300 less minutes, 287 less minutes, got 23 more blocks than the Mavericks' leading shot blocker, Maxi Kleber. He shot a more and better two-point percentage than anyone on the Mavericks roster except for Jalen Brunson, Luka Doncic, and he had more rebounds than anyone else on the Mavs except for Luka, with 496. Now, this is all wonderful, and JaVale McGee is an excellent signing, but he's not Jalen Brunson. If Luka's out, JaVale McGee is not going to solo beat the Jazz, but his fit next to Luka might be better. Now, that isn't to say that the Jalen Brunson loss wasn't a massive loss, but they did do something. But this team is not going to be as good as last year. They will not make the Western Conference Finals again. If they do, that would be an amazing run from Luka again. And, I mean, it would only further solidify the fact that he is going to be an all-time great. But I really don't see it happening. The West is super loaded this year. Last year, the Phoenix Suns won 64 games. I doubt they're going to have a massive regular season fall off. The Grizzlies, who are the 2 seed, probably aren't going to win more games than the Mavericks just because they're going to be missing Jaren Jackson Jr. for 30 games or something, which is a lot. The Warriors, obviously, better than them. They beat them in a series. It's hard to argue that. And then you've got the Nuggets, the Timberwolves, the Pelicans, the Clippers. I would say the Clippers are definitely better than them. The Wolves and the Pelicans, I would say they have more talented rosters, but they aren't necessarily the better teams just because Luka is definitely the best player out of anybody on those teams. But it's hard. It's hard. And I haven't even mentioned the Lakers, who obviously have LeBron and AD and Patrick Beverly. So there's a lot of things up in the air for this Mavericks team now. I'm not quite certain what their worst case scenario is. There's so many teams in the West that I think are going to be really close in win totals that they could still win, 48 games and end up being like a 9 seed, which would be like wild. But that's fully possible. And it's possible in the East too. I think we're going to see a lot of very close squads all throughout because everybody is really, really good this upcoming year because everybody kind of feels that the championship is wide open. There's no 2017 Warriors. LeBron isn't clearly the best player in the league anymore and hasn't been for at least a couple of years. So everybody feels like it's their chance to get their piece of the playoff pie, and that basically makes it so that somebody is going to have to miss out. Now, the Mavericks' best case scenario, I find it hard to believe that they'd be anything higher than a 5 seed. They are definitely not going to have a better record than the Warriors, the Nuggets, or the Clippers. I think those are going to be the top 3. Obviously, the Suns won 64 games last year, and then after that, I think there is a bit of a fall off. I think there's the Wolves, the Pelicans, and the Mavericks, all in some kind of jumble right next to them. And one of those teams might overachieve, one of those teams might underachieve. You never know. Somebody might get injured. And the one thing that I'm really concerned about with this Mavericks team is that if Luka, who has dealt with injuries in his career, Luka's stats are obviously fantastic, but if he's not on the court, I mean, it doesn't really matter. And he has missed time. I think he only played 65 games last year, and that's kind of been what he's played most of his career. Yeah, 65 games, 66 games, 61 games, and then 72 games. He's only played more than 66 games once in his career. And is this roster good enough to win games in this, let's be real, loaded NBA if Luka goes out with an injury? I don't know. I'm not planning on Luka being injured, but hey, it happens. Like he's missing games. Like it's historic that he's going to miss like 20 games or 18 games, whatever. So I find it hard to believe that they'll be better than a 5 seed. And as far as their worst case scenario, I really find it difficult to think that they'd miss the playoffs. Maybe they'd end up as a 7 seed. I don't know, but like there's so much variety in the ways that things that can happen this year that it's super up in the air. I'm just really hoping that Luka continues to show improvement on the court, and that will hopefully attract people to Dallas who, let's be real, haven't historically been a free agent destination. Dirk Nowitzki couldn't get anybody to come join him. Like the when he won his title, he had like a super old Jason Kidd on his team, and like Jason Terry. Like those aren't like big name free agents that like it was like, oh yeah, we got Kawhi. It's like, no, we got 38-year-old Jason Kidd. Yeah. Yeah. Like, come on, let's be real. And the other thing that concerns me is that Luka's a heliocentric offensive engine, which we've only really seen work with like 2 players in NBA history that are super heliocentric, and that's being LeBron and Jordan. That's pretty much it. Now, Luka is 100% just as talented as those 2 guys. Do not get it wrong. But it does mean that some of these other players are going to need to step up because, in all likelihood, all stars aren't going to take a look at Luka and be like, ah, yes, Luka, that guy who's going to have the ball in his hand 100% of the time, and then I'm going to have significantly less shots. Now, it's not like Luka hasn't played with ball handlers. Jalen Brunson is a ball handler and thrived next to Luka. But Jalen Brunson was also not somebody who was a number 1 option on a different team. DeJounte Murray probably didn't. I mean, it's not to say that he didn't do the same thing with Trey, but he's friends with Trey, right? Trey probably has the same issue. And he's actually quite lucky that his team was able to get DeJounte Murray. I don't know if I see the Mavericks having that kind of luck. Now, the front office has made some really good moves. They didn't toss $130 million at Jalen Brunson. They didn't, they got Spencer Dinwiddie and Davis Bertans. Like, they got players that can contribute. I mean, they still have Tim Hardaway Jr. coming off of an injury and ready to contribute, who had a really good season before he got injured. You've got Dorian Finney-Smith, who's one of the best 3-and-D wings in the league and is probably the most, like, if people thought they could get Dorian Finney-Smith, they would definitely want Dorian Finney-Smith. So I'm very concerned for the Mavericks. They have a lot of really good role players around Luka. I'm just concerned that that's not going to be enough. And I don't think Christian Wood is going to be the person to become an all-star next to Luka and take them into the promised land. Not that, well, it would be Luka, but taking him in the promised land. But I don't think Christian Wood and JaVale McGee are going to be the determinant factors. I think they'll make the playoffs. I think they'll be a 6 seed, but beyond that, it's hard to say. I think they're probably a second round out unless they get unlucky in the seeding and end up as like a 7 or 8 seed. And then they're playing, the Nuggets, the Clippers, or the Warriors in the first round. Although if they're a 6 seed, they're going to probably end up playing one of them. So really, they're only a second round out if they get a 5 seed. If they get a 6 through 8 seed, what are the odds that we get a Luka Clippers rematch and Luka wins it? That would be wild, right? Where it's like the best Clippers team ever, like the deepest. They've got the best squad. They've got Kawhi, PG. They've got John Wall. They've got literally like 20,000 rotational pieces that are considered like really good players, and then Luka just torches them. I would pay good money to see that. I hope that happens. Please, 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 please. That's another Best Worst. Thank you for watching the video, and have a wonderful day.